Hey, welcome. Happy Saturday. Thanks for joining me today. I know this is not the day I normally stream on, although in the future it might be. We got Mother's Day stuff coming up the next couple weeks. We're celebrating my mom's birthday, Mother's Day tomorrow, and my wife's the following Sunday.
Hey, welcome.
So,
Happy
sorry
Saturday.
about that. Um, so next two Sundays I won't be able to stream, so I thought I would do Saturday streams this week. I know I also missed last week, so it just basically means I'm really, really bad at keeping my schedule, I guess. Last week I was in Washington, D.C. for work, which stinks. Traveling for work is not usually that fun, but I did get to see Blues Light painting. So my friend Zach lives out there near DC. So I got to see him and his wife, and that was really, really cool to hang out with them. And we gorged ourselves on amazing food and drinks and just had the greatest time. So that was a lot of fun. But yeah, thanks for joining me today. You'll notice that my setup looks a little different than normal. This is not my painting area, or this is not my painting palette. So I have not got to the point yet where I'm ready to paint anything. Couple things happened. So one thing was I finished the Atlantis Miniatures commission, at least the first part of it. I'll go ahead and say now, although nothing is completely set in stone, but it looks like I will be doing some work for them in the future again. So maybe starting in about 6 weeks, I'll start doing some more work for Atlantis Miniatures. So that'll be fun. Get to do a lot more of their really, really awesome dwarf models. So we'll see. Again, nothing quite set in stone with that, but that looks like what's going to happen. So anyway, I finished the first 11 of those models, got them sent out. Anytime I finish a big project, I always take a little bit of hobby time off, sort of make sure my pay attention to my wife for a while and, catch up on some things. And like I said, I work travel. So kind of knocked me off my hobby game for a little bit. And my next couple projects before maybe doing some more Atlantis miniature stuff is one project is for a guy who sometimes pops on the stream, Pact Team. So I will be painting up a Redemptor Dreadnought for him. So basically today is continuing assembly day, cleaning up the base, adding a bunch of cool elements and stuff to the base. So we'll be doing that, assembling some other various miniatures. So today's kind of assembly day, just hang out, chill. I just don't have anything ready to paint today, so won't be doing painting. Sorry, my cat is headbutting my laptop, so sorry about the camera jiggle. Let's check out who's here. So Dreadroll, Sizigi. I told him he had to make sure that he told me what his Twitter handle was when he logged in, because he keeps popping in and then I completely forget that I talk to him all the time on Twitter, and then he comes in with a different username, and then I pretend like I don't know him because I always forget that that's who it is. So welcome, Dreadroll. I'm really glad you're here. A great guy, thanks for stopping over. Hopefully that you'll follow me, come back on days when I'm actually painting. Next Saturday, I'll stream again, probably somewhere around the same time. I can't promise the time exactly. It might be a little earlier in the day. But next week I'll actually get to painting whatever I'm working on. Non-washable gamer, welcome. Thanks for coming back. Yeah, that is awesome. I'm really hoping that all comes through. The owner of Atlantis Miniatures, Dan, was pleased with the miniatures as I was painting them. He was over the moon, really, really happy with them. And then he got them in person and he saw, I'm sure this is true for all painters, but I know for a fact it's true for mine, that I can never capture how they look with a picture. Like the pictures they never do the model justice. The paint job always looks way, way, way better in person. So once he saw them in person, he's like, I have to have more. I might actually be addicted to owning models now, painted by you. So so he's excited to maybe get me to paint some more stuff, and exactly what order it's going to happen in, I don't know. And I assume it'll be mostly the dwarf models, but he's got other lines. The mythology line was in Kickstarter, and so I assume he's going to start seeing some of those casts come up pretty soon. And then I heard a rumor that he might be launching ogres soon. And then, of course, he's got a big backlog of orcs and goblins and trolls and things that haven't been painted for him. So who knows? This could be a really big thing, and I might end up painting a lot of Atlantis miniature stuff in the future. which would be awesome because I really love their models, and it'd be fun. But the other thing that I've got, I put together my first set of these. I'm going to put together a second set and try to learn from what I did. They didn't come with instructions. I bought the masters of these off of a really cool, really talented painter in Greece. And my brother and I had them cast. And we did a limited run of 90 each of these two models. So these two Celtic busts. And I'm going to be doing a paint along with these starting in a few weeks here, which is going to be really fun. So I'm going to paint these on stream, and then if you have purchased them or if you just have a bust that's similar and you want to learn how to do bust painting or try some of the techniques that I do and do it like in real time with me, that would be really fun. And that's what I hope. So you can buy these through my website, gorillawithbrush.com. You can also just message me on social media if you'd rather do it that way. I reduced the price on these for right now. So each one, you can get the pair of them for $30. Each one is about $16 or $17 if you just want one of the two, which is a pretty good price, I think, for such a highly detailed model. So hopefully, if you're interested in that, buy them, paint them with us. I might touch up a little bit of the construction on these guys today. There's a couple spots I'm not totally happy once they got all glued together, or I saw a couple places I missed in cleaning up. So I might just every so often grab these guys. It's interesting. They don't have a lot of pieces, but I'm playing around with exactly how the different hair braids exactly go on. Try to make them look the best as possible. But yeah, so these guys are fun. I have a second set of these. I might, if we get to them, I'll work on assembling those today too. But yeah, back to the Redemptor Dreadnought and working on his base. Sorry also if I'm a little snuffly or if I get into a sneezing fit later. My allergies are just going bonkers. It's that time of year. Here in Arizona, I'm pretty sure my allergies are ragweed related. We have 13 different species of ragweed in Arizona. And so this time of the spring/summer, usually have some allergy issues. And it got really, really windy the last couple days. And that kicks up all the dust, kicks up all the pollen, and just makes my allergies go crazy. But yeah, a little bit about this project. So again, this is for one of my viewers who is doing a custom chapter. He didn't realize it at the time when he was thinking about a color scheme and a theme, but he realized, his wife, I think, told him later, he's like, you basically just described the Lannisters from Game of Thrones. And he goes, oh, I guess I did. So it's basically a Lannister theme. So they really like a deep burgundy, a brown, red is going to be the main color with kind of darker gold accents, like a brownish yellow accent colors. And then lion theme for the icon, for the chapter icon. So he sent me a few bits to work on these as well. So we've got this big lion shield that I put over the Aquila. So instead of having a big prominent eagle, they're going to have a lion there. I'm going to do tons of freehand on this model. So my current plan is to find some really cool line art of a lion head and do like the two halves of the face on the two plates here. And then like filigree and things like that on the leg armor. Then on for his arms, kind of again do a lion design up on the arm, some filigree around it. Yeah, just go kind of nuts with freehanding, which if you have watched my stream before, you kind of know that that freehand's my thing. I look for as much as I can to freehand on a model, and considering how much flat open space this model has, I will probably just fill it with freehand design, and it'll be really cool. So yeah, that's what I'm doing. We've got the way that this guy wanted it. He wanted it to not be the traditional Dreadnought where it's got essentially a Space Marine on life support inside of it, but rather they're piloted. So I know he put one together where he has a guy who's piloting in it, and it's got wheels for feet, and so it's almost kind of like a Segway, looking design, but with a robot. And then this one, he wanted to have it on the legs, but then have this guy emerging from inside of the thing. So I have it so you can kind of see his back leg is or his back hand there is braced like that, and he's pointing. So I can't really stick him in there now because I put the pegs on his feet to paint him. But when he's sitting there, his back hand braces against the chassis to steady him as he's pointing. So that's kind of the way that the design is going to be. And then his right arm has been magnetized to have the two different main weapons that they can have. Again, they're pegged for painting. Yeah, the Lannister motto takes on a way darker tone. 40K. A Lannister always repays his debts. Well, all of 40K just takes on a dark tone for being in 40K, right? Yeah, I did some gap filling on this too. This was my first time. On recommendation of somebody else, I tried using the plastic putty from Vallejo. It worked pretty well. It's still quite messy. I mean, green stuff is not a great tool for gap filling on models like this, where the seams are so smooth, and it's a little bit hard to sand the hard plastic. So this worked, but again, it was kind of messy. So right now I just saw some spots where I basically let stuff pool, I guess, and it just kind of cleaned it up. So is anybody out there doing any hobbying of their own today? Painting or assembling or doing anything fun? I was thinking about when I do that paint along, which again, I hope you guys join along with me. That'll be really fun. But of having like a hashtag on Twitter or something, or people can send me pictures. So if we're working on it, maybe one session we do, like the basic skin tone or something, then have people show what they did. Like send me the pictures, and then we'll show them on stream about how people are progressing, and just kind of create a really cool community around this where we're all working together on the same model and we can give each other feedback. And so I can show it on stream, or we can share it on Twitter or any other social media platform, and be able to actually talk to each other and ask for specific criticisms, and I don't know, make it like a really cool learn to paint / project for us. I have painted some busts in the past, but those were always just kind of whatever I wanted to do, like the Wolf and Girl, which was a really large bust that I painted. When did I do that? A couple months ago, I finished that one. I don't know. Time flies. That could have been like 6 months ago. I can't really remember. But these will be interesting because they're going to have the movie reference. So I'll pull up the reference pictures, and I'm going to try to do as close to possible as all the colors and effects and things that they have from the actual movie. So that'll be a good challenge for me. And because I'm going to have two sets of them, what I might do is I might actually paint two copies of the same model at the same time, and maybe do sort of two different versions. So so looking at the movie poster or the movie shots, like this is what I would do to try to mimic that exactly. And then maybe do kind of a shortcut version where maybe I don't do quite as many advanced techniques on it and show you like an easier stepping stone to get a really nice effect. So one would be sort of the advanced version, and one would be like the intermediate version. So people can kind of work towards whatever they're pushing themselves at in their skill level. So I got a few ideas rattling around, and I got to kind of finalize some of that. But you should paint Infinity. Infinity models, are you talking about today? See? Now I remember who you are, and I know you've been painting a lot of Infinity models. I was about to say, you should paint Infinity models. They're really cool. You know that because you do paint them all the time. I really enjoy painting the Infinity models, but never really learned the game. I've watched a few people play a couple games, but I don't know. I got so burnt out from actually playing miniature games that there's just nothing that really strikes my fancy at the moment. I'm just using board games to scratch my gaming itch right now. All right. So what I did for his base, I used some larger scale cork to kind of create some elevation on the base. I'm going to tear a bunch of this down. I'm just trying to create a raised area for his foot to go because I have him stepping up. The pose is going to be, so the way the model is going to be on there and pointing, the gun arm is essentially going to be in a pose something like this, where the gun is going to be pointing in the way that the pilot guy is pointing. And then the power fist, or whatever they call them, is going to kind of be down at its side a little bit. And so it's stepping up, bracing itself to then reach forward and shoot. That's kind of the position I have in my mind. So I wanted this foot elevated on the front. But what I really want it to be, right now it's just a pile of cork. What I want it to ultimately be is a pile of rubble from the building. So I got these from Pegasus. Pegasus Hobbies makes these red bricks. They've got 2 different sizes. And I'm going to mix with just different rocks and texture paint and all sorts of stuff, and I'm going to try to make this look like rubble. I've got some other cool bits. Guitar string if I want to have cables sticking out. I've got these I-beams, and then other like corner pieces, different size I-beam. So I'm going to actually break some of those up, stick it into the rubble, really sell kind of the idea that it's the ruins of a destructed building that has steel and brick and all sorts of parts to it. Whoop. You hate painting the motorbikes? I'm going to start your first 75 millimeter. Yeah, my first 75 millimeter, I'm going to consider those Ouroboros Orc 75 millimeter. They're technically 54, but they're really the size of like a 75 millimeter human. So those 2, and then the alley that I did was some of the most enjoyable models I've ever painted. So I'm actually really eager to get back and do a lot more 75 millimeter models. I bought a bunch. I got about 12 that are in my cabinet. So those are going to be really fun. Although, who knows? If I end up painting a bunch more Atlantis miniatures, I might be continue to work on 28 millimeter for a while. So Zach, Blues Light, wants to say, so you're not going to have the power fist giving somebody the finger? From what it seems like, Pack Team, he might actually like that. I don't know. But no, I'm not going to have that raised. Maybe if I end up doing a second one of these for the charity raffle, give maybe the middle finger would fly for that. Did I see the Hellboy Kickstarter? So many minis. So I will say I only saw the painted models of the heroes that have been going around that Angel painted. So I saw those, but I didn't go look at the game because for 2 reasons. Number one, I don't think my wife would play that game with me. And these days I really only buy board games I think my wife would play because she's the primary person that I play board games with. So we only buy stuff that I think she'd like. Second of all, I've committed to buying no miniatures this year. And so I'm not going to go tempt myself by going and clicking on Kickstarter links for that. Plus, I own 2 different Hellboy models. I own a Hellboy bust, and then I own like a 28 millimeter Hellboy. And I already have some plans to paint with those, so I'm not going to buy more Hellboy models until at least I finish those. But my idea with that Hellboy model actually was I was going to put it on like a square plinth and then have create a background. And because Mike Mignola's artwork is very it's very unique, but I also think it would be easy to recreate some of those pictures of statues and things that are actually in the comic book, because it's really just, there's not like gradients of color and things. It's just kind of like solid colors and shadows, and it's very geometric. And I think it would be pretty easy to reproduce some of those. So I was going to scan some, print them off, and then actually hand paint a background that looks like it's right out of the comic book, and then do a base that looks like it's kind of, right out of the comic book, and then have the Hellboy miniature painted. So he looks like it's just a 3-dimensional pane from the comic book. So that's my plan. I think that would be really cool whenever I get to it. I got all these ideas, but never enough time to do them. If I could work in some rounded plasticard. You mean like one of these pipes that I have ready-made in here? So yeah, I've got some of that. So do some water effect. That would be really cool. Yeah. I might do that. I'm just going to be throwing a bunch of stuff together. I don't fully have a plan for this base, other than it's going to be lots of rubble. So right now it's all, I glued it a couple days ago. I'm just kind of cutting it down so it's not so blocky. I have some thinner pipe too they're just chunks from when I've done other things with it. I was thinking of bending it a little bit and having it sticking in the rubble pile. Like pipes that have bent when the building collapsed. I'm saving a bunch of these pieces I cut off because I'm going to make just a big glob of rubble goo that I'm going to just mix with a bunch of glue and then pile up on the base. I want to give a little bit of a plug today to a podcast I started listening to this week. So there's I feel really bad now. I blanked on the name of the channel they're on Twitch and on YouTube. Shoot. Hold on a second. I want to make sure I give them proper call out here. So, Saving Throw Show. So the Saving Throw Show or Saving Throw Network or something like that. So they do a whole bunch of video play RPGs. So I think one of their big ones is Wild Cards. It's kind of set in the Old West, and everybody gets dressed up, and they have a GM and 4 players, and they record the sessions. They put out things. Now, I will be the first to admit, I'm not a huge watcher of that kind of content. I love to play RPGs, and then I have done a ton of RPGs in the last 20 years. Usually I'm the GM because I'm the most responsible of all the people that I know, and most of the other people either drop the ball or just refuse to do it. So I'm almost always the GM. But I love GM. I love playing in RPGs. I don't like watching other people play them. That's just me. I know that it's really popular, and I would never want to knock what other people enjoy. I just don't really enjoy watching them. So I will admit I have not watched their actual gameplays. But one of the people who's in there, Megan Caves, has been really cool to me on Twitter. She's retweeted a bunch of my stuff, and which is just really cool. And so I gave her a shout out on my Follow Friday the other day. But I noticed that she was a host on a podcast. I was like, oh, this is cool. I'm more of a podcast guy. I'll listen to podcasts and things like that. So she's one of the 3 hosts of a podcast called Experience Pointers. I think they have about 15 episodes. and they're just really experienced role-play game players and GMs. And they go through topics like one of the players was mostly a player and hadn't really done a lot of GMing, and so she has started to do some GMing. And so what she'll do is 2 of their episodes are her reflecting on her experience, breaking down how tough it was for her, what she thought about it afterwards, what she would do differently. It was a really cool inside look at what it's like to try to be a GM if there's players that haven't been and are interested in trying that out. It was really, really cool insights. They did some episodes devoted to breaking the mold. So taking standard player classes like a barbarian or a cleric and trying to say, how could you play this class but not have it just be the stereotypical barbarian or stereotypical cleric? And so those were really fun. And I think they're really good resources. And I know a lot of people who follow this channel are big into role-playing games and RPGs. So I would really recommend checking that podcast out. So it's Experience Pointers. I just downloaded it through the Apple podcast app, but definitely worth checking out. Oh yeah, you saw my my screen. Yeah, let's see if I can get it without. So I've got that for my lock screen and then my big screen. Great comic strip. One of the things that I was thinking about as I was listening to those episodes about breaking the mold, it's very intriguing for me to listen to people who were kind of born and raised in the Dungeons and Dragons roleplay groups. Because my first role-playing experiences were not in D&D. And I've only ever actually played in 2 very short D&D campaigns. Didn't really love them all that much. And kind of gave me a little bit of a bad taste for D&D, which I know is not really warranted, but I think I prefer the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay system. And one of the things that I really like about it was actually really highlighted to me in listening to those episodes about breaking the mold of these kind of stereotypical characters. Because, so again, the system that I was sort of raised in and that I've played and that I prefer to run games in, they don't have character classes. Like you don't have rogue, you don't have wizard, at least not in that particular way that D&D does, where you just have like those kind of standard things. Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay does it by careers. And so there's like 100-something different careers, anything from, you could just be a soldier, you could be a captain, you could be a scout for the army, you could be a charcoal burner, somebody who lives out in the forest, chops down trees, creates fires and burns them for charcoal. You could be a rat catcher if you live in the urban areas. The idea is, your character started from somewhere and had a job. And so the first thing you start off is, what's your job in life? Now, having a job doesn't tell you anything about what your character's like. There's really there's fewer stereotypes that would be associated with a job as there would be, I think, for like the character classes that are in classic D&D. So if you're thinking really about it as a job instead of a defining characteristic of your character, I've always, myself, when I make characters or when other people were making characters for my games, I encourage them to not even look at the rule book for what kind of characters there are or what kind of jobs there are, and just make up a backstory for your character. Like, your guy's 25 years old, he's 35 years old, he's whatever, however old he is. What's he been doing for his whole life up to this point? And making them come up with an entire backstory for the guy or girl. Once you create that backstory, it's like, okay, so what can we do to give your person a job that would reflect that that's where they're at in their life? I don't know. I always just found it created much more dynamic characters that just naturally weren't feeling confined into any kind of stereotypes, because it wasn't like, okay, I'm going to be the healer, so I'm going to be a cleric and I'm going to run around buffing people and healing people. Like, that really wasn't how the system worked. And so I just find it really intriguing to listen to people kind of talk about issues within the most popular role-playing game system, and kind of how their thinking is influenced by the fact that that's where their origins are. And because I have such different origins and different images for what the system does, I don't know, I just find it's kind of fascinating to look at somebody who's got a different background and perspective on that stuff. I remind you of a grown-up Calvin. I will take that as a huge compliment. I can see that too. Hirelings of Asura. Oh, the hirelings, yeah. Those 4 miniatures. Those were the most tempted I have been this year to actually buy new miniatures. I held off. I did not buy them. Now, if somebody out there wants to buy them for me and, just ship them, that doesn't count, as I'm not spending my own money on them. But yeah, I don't know. And I love the way that the Warhammer Fantasy system, because it's based so much on careers, I don't really love dungeon crawls. Again, whenever I say these things, I'm only just stating my own preferences. I never ever want to diminish what other people enjoy. It's just personally for me, I've never enjoyed dungeon crawl type adventures. And I think the reason is because I've been into tabletop wargaming for all of the time that I was in RPGs. I played Warhammer 40K, Mordheim, all of those games. And so to me, if I wanted to do a battle and roll dice and fight things, I would just rather go play one of those games. I wanted my role-playing games to actually be about role-playing and just imagining this different world. And so when I run games, I don't run a ton of combat. There's fights or potential fights in every session, but it's not the focus. And so the experience points aren't based on what monsters you kill. It's more about achieving different goals during the sessions. And so my sessions are very, very heavily driven on story and intrigue and politics and all of that kind of stuff. And so the fact that my characters have jobs allows me to place them within a world and give them contacts and give them a setting to where their progression up their career ladder can be integrated into the political situation that's happening in whatever region they're in, and you can tie them into the story, and you can give motivation for the different quests they go on or the different adventures that happen to them, very much based on how they're integrated into their surroundings. So, and again, I don't mean to say you can't do that with D&D, but I just feel like the Warhammer roleplay system makes it very easy to do that. So I like that. The other thing they were talking about, which I thought was interesting in one of their episodes, was about, I think one of their viewers. I'm just talking more than working, sorry, but hopefully this is interesting to you. They were discussing. Somebody was homebrewing a system and wanted some advice about it because they were going to plan a game for people who had never done RPGs before. And so they wanted some advice on how to make the system, or any pitfalls to avoid in trying to modify a system to kind of simplify it some. And so there was a long discussion about that. And I mean, if you want to listen to that, you get to that episode, you can listen to that discussion. But one of the things I realized, I think that it really made me realize, is when I run games, I actually run a really simplified version of the Fantasy Roleplay. And by the way, I use 2nd edition. I think they're about to put out 4th edition. 3rd edition was not very well received. I can talk more about that later if anybody's interested. But 2nd edition, I own all the books and I really like it, so I never felt the need to jump into the 3rd edition. Got to get back to my train of thought now. They were talking about, so I really like the way that they use a D100 system. So you might have a weapon skill like a 35, for example. And the idea is you always have to roll underneath your skill number to actually achieve whatever you're doing. So if you want to hit somebody in combat, you've got to roll a 35 or less. If you start getting better and you get points to allocate to your weapon skill, maybe it goes up to 40 or 45, obviously you get a higher chance of hitting. But then you can readily modify things. So let's say you've got a weapon skill of 35 and you're going up against an expert swordsman who is just, the most amazing guy around. Well, rather than just say, well, you have still a 35% chance of hitting this guy and you're just like barely capable at all with a sword, you can actually modify the difficulty of the level. So you just basically tell anyone they have anywhere from a -30 to a +30 to their roll. So if you just say, okay, make a weapon skill roll, but at -30, they have to subtract 30 from their weapon skill before they make the roll. And so this could reflect how much more difficult the test should be based on whatever circumstances are there. So it's just really cool to have a system that I don't need a rule book open for every little thing that might happen, and I just have to kind of say, like, okay, what's the rule for this? I can just go, okay, I think that whatever this player just came up with off the top of their head, that's probably best done as an agility test. And then I think for this character in these circumstances that's a -20 agility test. And so I just say, okay, we'll make a -20 agility test. And so I don't have to have any rule books open. The system feels very intuitive to me, which I really enjoy. So I realized that I was never really using a lot of the pre-written rules. I just kind of was doing things on the fly based on how they had that difficulty system built into all their stuff. And therefore, the games just seemed to really run smoothly for me. And again, I don't think I really realized until they had that discussion just how much I was actually doing that. I was kind of homebrewing that to make it a little bit more fun, so that the players didn't need the rule books. They didn't have to be well versed in what the rule book said for different things. They just can kind of use the intuitive ideas and just what I would come up with on the fly for the different tests. All right, let's actually get some work done here. So I'm now going to take some of those different I-beams and things, and let's just stick them in the base. A few different spots. And I do kind of like your idea about having a water pipe. So I'm going to do that. Not going to worry too much about making this cut very nice on this side. It's going to be buried. I think I might make a couple nicks in the pipe. And it's kind of funny, I've been slowly assembling this dreadnought over the last, couple months, just as I had a few minutes knowing this project was coming up. It's been a really long time since I've done one of these big GW kits. I really don't like them. I spent more time assembling this model than I've spent painting a lot of models. Assembly is not my favorite part of the hobby. Is the customization worth it? You mean as opposed to, because I know they make this kit as like a snap together. It's just a few pieces. It's not that many pieces. If you asked me before I started this project, I would have told you it was. I don't know that the customer would have allowed me to do one of the snap togethers anyway. But like looking back on it, I don't know. I've never enjoyed, there's two things I've never really enjoyed that much in the hobby. One of those is painting vehicles. And the other is assembling things. So I'm not quite sure why I thought it'd be a really great idea to paint 2 of these Redemptor Dreadnoughts, but I said I would do it, so at least this first one I have to do. The other one I was going to do for the charity raffle. And I'm sort of starting to run short on time to get that done. So it's possible that might not happen, which would be unfortunate. However, the reason I might not have time for that is just because of all the other commissions I've been doing, and I donate 25% of the money I get from painting commissions or from selling models, those Braveheart busts, things like that. I donate that. So the fact that I'm getting more commissions and earning more money that way, I'm still donating to charity. So I don't feel super bad. I mean, I feel a little bit bad for Nova Open Charitable Foundation, but I just don't know if I'm going to be able to get the model done in time for that. They do have a later raffle, like in the fall. Maybe I can get it done for that, but I think July 1st is the cutoff for getting stuff into the actual Nova Open. And that's probably not going to happen. But we'll see. Kind of depends on how fast this paint job goes. I don't have a ton of rhyme or reason into what I'm doing here. I'm just trying to make a pile of crap. Something similar to what you might see if a building was actually blown up and just crumbled. I had to pick an all-time favorite model to paint. So, do you mean the all-time favorite model I have ever painted in the past? Or if I could pick only one model to actually paint in the future, which would it be? Let's see. I actually think my favorite model ever to paint was the Ouroboros Orc Brave. So the one with the axe who's pointing, it's in that diorama that's on the top of my Twitter page. There's just something, that model had just character, and I just really enjoyed, at that time I was really messing around with learning how to do the building up the layers and then glazing over, which is kind of the technique that I've adopted as my major technique for the time being. That was one of the first models I really learned how to do it well on. And I just had such a blast. So when I think back fondly on models that I painted, that one always pops to the top of the list. So that was really fun. The Wolf and Prowler I painted for Blues Light Painting was really, 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 really fun as well. The model itself was cool, but that banner, I really pushed myself to start adopting shading and doing other things on a flat surface that I don't always do when I do two-hand or freehand. So I felt like I learned a lot on that, and that was a really, really fun design to pull off. So those are probably my two favorite models I've ever painted. In terms of like what I would love to paint, so there's a couple of the Scale 75 Steam Wars 75 millimeter models that for some reason just really, really call to me. One of them is Daisy. She's part of you can get the whole diorama, but I only just bought the one model. She's kind of sitting down on a couple suitcases, and she's got her legs crossed, and she's kind of mad. In the diorama, the steam engine that they're riding on is broken down, so she's kind of sitting down next to it, like somebody who's stranded on the side of the road and their car's broken down. She's got a little bulldog next to her. For some reason, that model I just really, really want to paint. So that's one that's in my mind. What else is there that I have? The Hellboy model I was talking about earlier, I really want to paint that at some point. I think doing that background is going to be a lot of fun. It's really something that's stuck in my head. Those are probably the two most that I'm looking the most forward to painting. Yeah. Let's do some more I-beam action on here. Is there any model that you're in particular really looking forward to painting? Should also mention that there's another, I haven't heard back from the guy. So he contacted me a couple weeks ago wanting a commission paint job, and I told him I could probably squeeze him in. And he wants me to paint the Blind Water pinup model from Privateer Press. I had it in my collection, and he was wanting to know if I'd paint it up for him. I haven't heard back from him yet, so I don't know if it's going to go through for sure. And then a buddy of mine wants me to paint from the Star Wars, I don't think it's from Star Wars Legion. I think it's whatever the other Star Wars game is. Is it Akita? She's like a Jedi with the kind of the long things coming off her head, and she's got two lightsabers. Forgive me, I don't know her name. But he wants me to paint up that model for him. So those are the other couple things that I'm working on in the future before I get back to Atlantis Miniatures stuff. Yeah, classic Vader and Luke. You know what you should do with that is paint them up and then make a cool decorative display base with circular cutouts where their bases can sit. So when you're not playing with the models, you can sit them there like facing off against each other. And then when you want to play with them, you take them off the base and then play. I think that'd be really cool. Yeah, I think you might be right. Imperial Assault, Ashoka. That sounds right. At least close enough that I think everybody probably knows what we're talking about. So I have these two different brick sizes, but just given the scale, I think these bricks maybe seem a little large. Although maybe they'd be better, good foundation stones. I just think those, if once you put a couple of those on the base, you're really not going to have much room for other stuff. So I think I'm going to use the smaller bricks. I'm going to put a few down like maybe there used to be the remnants of the edge of a wall here or something. The wall remnant back by the back leg, like the knee that was locking. Yeah, that would look cool. I've actually seen something like that. It really is a cool effect. I'm not going to do that only because I'm building this before I paint the model. I'm building this base up. So if I did something like that, it's going to block off a lot of the painting space. And because I'm planning to do so much freehand, I could really end up messing myself up. Otherwise, I would be all over that because I think that's a great idea. And my hope is that this all holds together once the glue's dry. All right, next step, we're going to see how this works. Because my next plan, let me go grab a cup. Cool, I'm glad you enjoyed the scale inks. Yeah, you can also add a little of the mixing medium to the inks. That works well too, because you end up with a really, really highly saturated paint almost that way. Just add a little bit of matte medium to them. That works as well. Yeah, I don't do a ton with inks, although Blues Lights here I guess he's still in the chat. I did pick up white ink on his recommendation, and while I was there, I picked up a red and a purple. They were really highly saturated. I'm going to see how those work. But the white ink he was recommending for doing like some airbrush work with white because it doesn't spit. It's like super thin. So I picked up that to mess around with. All right, so what I'm going to do here, we're going to see how this works. I'm going to make a pot of rubble. Throw a bunch of bricks in there. I'm going to crumble up the cork I cut off. I'm usually more deliberate with this, but I also don't do a lot of sci-fi models with tons of like broken down buildings and things. So the worst that can happen is that this looks terrible and that we just don't put it on the model, or that we do something different. So I got some thinner cork here I'm going to break up into the mix too. Basically just creating some different layers of texture. I'm going to put some sand and gravel into this as well. And then just put a ton of glue and mix it all together. Put it on the base. And then once that dries, I'm going to go back with texture paint from Vallejo, and then put that over the top, which will give it a nice dirt kind of covering to stuff, help smooth out a little of the rough patches and holes and things. By the way, this is the thing that is below. I just have the lid from an old banker box. And what I did was I sealed it. I sealed all the corners and things because they're just all created by folding up together. So I sealed everything with packing tape so no little bits can ever escape from the corners of the box. This is just my junk box, so as I'm cleaning models, everything just goes into this. Periodically, I'll dump this in the garbage can, and it works pretty well. Well, thanks, man. Yeah, it's really good to experiment on models for other people. No, oops, that's the same one I just put in. This is some finer grain. The nice thing is that the fact that this is a ruined building, it's kind of hard to really make it look terrible. Because it is, after all, a building that's been blown up. that might need a lot more filler. It's got a lot of big chunks in there. All right, and away we go. This is just Elmer's glue, basically PVA glue. And this is my drinking water, but that's okay. I haven't used this spoon yet. Just add a little water to help things mix up. This is kind of similar to what you do if you make snow for bases. So there's a snow powder mix you can get from different companies. So if you're going to do snow on a base, or what I do for snow on a base is, so just take a cup like this. I put some of the snow flocking in there. I put some of the white glue. And then I usually put a little bit of white paint in there, a little bit of water, and a little bit of gloss varnish. The gloss varnish will give it just a hint of that shininess that snow will have. And then the white paint helps to really intensify the white color of the snow flocking, which if you don't put that in there can sometimes get a little dull. And it also, it's just more binder in there. It helps the snow kind of stick together along with the glue. All right. And we'll see. Hopefully I didn't make this too slushy. It's pretty slushy. I maybe didn't need that much glue. It's an easy way to fix this. Wastes a little bit more basing materials, but that's okay. Yeah, definitely. So the tutorial videos that I did for the Atlantis Miniature Dwarves, which are coming, one of those videos does how I base her, and it's pretty like basic level basing. But also this is one of the reasons I wanted to, I could have just canceled today because I didn't have anything ready to paint, but I thought this would actually be really good to do some assembly, because I did have somebody tell me one time that they really even don't, they would love to just see how I prep models for painting and what that looks like. So I thought, oh, I've had requests for basing videos, I've had requests for prepping videos, so I'll just kind of do whatever we get time for today. All right. We have the mixture now. Now, good way to apply it. Let's see. I'm just gonna slap some on the base here. Oh no. Try to avoid touching the model. It's generally not good to get PVA glue on the parts of the model that you're going to paint. Your paint doesn't really want to stick to the glue. Making it worse. You can tell this is live and unedited. Hey, see you, Dreadraw, man. Thanks for stopping by. Do I ever strip paint or basing off of models and redo stuff? If so, how? Not if I can help it. It's not a fun process, and really it can be difficult to get all the paint off of a model. And if you don't get all the paint off of a model, then you know some of the details are still corrupt. Like they end up with their too thick layers on there and things like that. So I have done it in the past. Usually it's when I get secondhand models. So something someone else has painted, and then I'll take the paint off. And that's always a little bit of a dicey game. So I'll tell you what the general strategy versus what sometimes happens. So a general strategy is that you take some cleaner like Simple Green. There's other, if you Google how to strip paint, you'll have a lot of people tell you different products. What I use is Simple Green. So you take Simple Green, you take a cup, you put the model in the cup, and you fill it up with Simple Green just until the model is totally covered. If it's concentrated Simple Green, you can get away with like a 50-50 mix of Simple Green and water. Although the more concentrated your thing is, the faster the paint will come off. Just depends on how much you want to. I mean, you end up just tossing a bunch of cleaner. So it depends on how much you want to waste. You let the model soak for 12 to 24 hours, and then you take an old toothbrush and you start scrubbing it off. And it may all come off, or it might not. You might have to keep soaking it. But this is where it gets tricky, because this is a great technique that works for most acrylic paints. But if you're buying, and so if you know what paint you used, if you just used GW or Scale 75 or P3 paints or any of that kind of stuff, that technique will be fine. It'll strip the paint off. Where things get tricky is if you get a model secondhand from somebody else and you don't know what paint they used, you could be in trouble. If they used an enamel, if they used some kind of sealant that's really super strong, depending on what kind of primer they used, like all different possibilities, you could end up with like a surface that just really doesn't respond to the Simple Green. In that case, I don't know what I would tell you. I had a friend who that happened to. He just ended up kept going with Simple Green and lots of scrubbing, Simple Green, lots of scrubbing, and after about a week, he got most of the paint off, but we still don't to this day know what those models were painted with. That made it so difficult. But you can run into that problem. In terms of basing materials, I have rebased models, so I just pop the base off. And usually when you do that, you have to kind of touch up some of the paint right where your model meets the base. But other than that, they can just pop off, depending on how much glue you use, depending on how they were connected. I have done that in the past. Early on in my painting days, I was doing a very, very simple basing scheme that I thought looked okay, but then as I got to be a better painter, I realized it was not a very good basing scheme. I was just using thick flock and coating the entire base with it. So it didn't even look like real grass. It wasn't static grass. It was like the thick clump flock. And so it didn't really look very natural. So I popped those bases off and redid them with stone and grasses, static grasses. The last video I did for Allie is also a really good basing video. I didn't do rock with her, but I did do the like doing dry brush different colors onto the base. I showed how to do grasses, different grasses like little clump grasses or different static grass. I think I showed both of those techniques. So that's a great video to check out if you're wanting some beginning basing techniques. All right. So I'm going to call that good. I think it's, as it dries, we'll see. Like I said, I'm going to go back with texture paint to smooth the transition between different things and help fill in a little bit of the gaps. I won't be able to do that today. I really got to wait for all that paint to dry, or all that glue to dry, and we'll see how it turns out. If there ends up being any exposed foam or exposed of the cork, place where I don't want to maybe put the textured paint on, I'll probably go back with just PVA glue or Mod Podge, which is kind of a similar stuff, and just paint over that section to sort of seal the cork in, which gives you a better surface to paint on top of. But yeah, I don't want to do anything more when we got all this wet glue around. So stop working on him for now. Right. Give me 1 second, I'll be right back. All right, sorry. So one of the things, I'm gonna have all this like leftover goop. I could always be more careful when I'm mixing and really start small. I tend to get a little overzealous, and I always have lots of extra stuff that ends up just getting thrown away. So yeah. So if I can give you any advice, is maybe really start with a small amount of the mix and a small amount of glue and mix, and then see how things are going and just add a little bit from there. I kind of was like, let's just throw everything in and stir it up. It's all right. All right, what are we gonna do now? Well, I still haven't heard back from the guy about the blind water pinup girl, so I'm not going to put her together until I know for sure that I'm gonna have to paint her. So I'm just gonna work on maybe, what time is it, 3:25? So I'll do a little work on assembling the other pair of the busts. Maybe go in here and clean up a little bit on these guys. Now I might need a little bit of green stuff because a few of the spots right where the hair connects, I think could probably be, the transition could be smoothed out a bit so that once it's primed, you don't see like a stark transition from where the extension pieces are and where his hair is. Couple little spots I need to fill in on the actual model himself too. He's like right here where the base of the axe design, like the raised area on the axe, it's just like a little hole. this happens with resin. Resin gets tiny little air bubbles in it. And so what'll happen is sometimes they'll be on the surface or sometimes they'll be right below the surface. So the surface ones you'll just see right off the bat. Some of them below the surface, you'll be cleaning the model. And then all of a sudden you just, like a bunch of the resin just falls away. And you end up with this little hole. It's just a natural part of the process. When they mix the resin, it mixes air bubbles into it. They try to get them out, but there's a little bit of air suspended in the mixture. It's impossible to fully prevent that. By the way, I'm not doing this just because I'm streaming and I have to talk, but generally speaking, especially if you're a beginner, it's good to think about this. When you're working with resin models, you should wear a air mask, like a breathing mask. Resin is really, really bad for your lungs, so if you end up breathing in like resin dust, it can be really bad for you. Some of the things you can do is, if you're working on resin, to cut down on that is cut into it rather than sand it. So use a razor blade and actually cut the pieces. Or if you are doing something like you want to kind of do a sanding or a pseudo sanding, is scrape with your knife instead of using sandpaper. The sandpaper puts it into really, really fine particles, which makes it really much easier to breathe in and get deep into your lungs. Whereas the scraping creates heavier particles that are more likely to just like fall into your garbage collection area. So since I'm not wearing a mask, if I cut into things, I can blow the chunk off, like the big chunk. Again, if it was dust, I wouldn't want to blow it, get more in the air. But I have an old toothbrush next to me, so if I do have a mask on or whatever, like I can use the toothbrush to wipe off the stuff that I'm getting off the model, so that I can see what's underneath, see if there's still spots I need to get. All right, so like I said, I've got 2 copies of these that I'm painting up. If you aren't interested in the paint along, in terms of painting one of these yourself, but you do like the models, there's a couple other options of ways you can support me, support this project. I tend to not really hold on to anything anymore. When I paint models, If somebody wants to buy them, I just sell them. Used to be, I was a big gamer in terms of playing the tabletop games, and so I'd have my own models I'd go play with, and obviously I wouldn't want to sell those while I was playing the game. But since I don't really play any games anymore, and most of the models I paint are just more display anyway, I just have a display shelf in my office, my personal office, and I'm the only person who sees the models. So I kind of got to the point where I didn't really know why I was holding on to them anymore. I had the pictures, and the pictures were fine, and that's how most people experience my work anyway. And I thought there'd probably be a lot more enjoyment for the models if other people actually owned them and were displaying them or looking at them themselves. So I kind of got to the point where I'm not precious about it anymore. I just sell pretty much anything I paint. So if you're interested in purchasing these busts after I paint them on stream, you can let me know, whether it be later when you see them painted or if you want to reserve them. You can just let me know. Another option is I can just paint 2 of them for you. And there's an option for that on my website if you just want to order painted versions. And I'm offering those at a pretty significant discount off of what my normal commission rate would be. So if you like these busts but you're not really that interested in painting them yourself, those are some good options to still get your hands on some. They'll be painted versions, and can support me and support this project that way. And also, like I said, support charity, because I always do 25% of the money I take in, I do to charity. Which, speaking of, this is kind of a cool thing that's coming up. So Grayed Out is a guy on Twitter. So he makes dice bags. And his dice bags are really, really cool. He sews internal pockets into them. So if you have dice you want to keep separate is cool. Or if you want to put your dice in the side pockets, you could throw your miniature in the middle. If you're doing a role-playing night or something and you use miniatures, you can take your miniature with you to game night. So anyway, really, really high quality dice bags. And I got some fabric printed that has my Gorilla with a Brush logo on it. And he is making me a set of dice bags. And what I'm going to do with those dice bags is I'm offering them for sale, but 100% of the money goes to charity. So the final price of the bag is going to be, the starting price of the bag, I should say, is going to be somewhere around $25, give or take. So you could throw $25 to charity and get yourself a dice bag. Or what I would actually think would be really cool is if you paid more for the dice bag, you can pay as much as you want for it. But again, every dollar that you pay is going to go to charity. So if you're feeling especially generous, you want to give $40 to charity, get yourself a dice bag, and do some good. That's my plan. There's going to be at least 7 dice bags available. If there's a huge demand, I might make a second run on those. But the 3 charities I'm supporting this year are the Arizona Animal Welfare League, which is helps homeless pets, adoption center, things like that for local things in Arizona. The other one is the Arizona Pet Project. Arizona Pet Project does neighborhood spay and neuter clinics, so helping reduce the population of unwanted dogs and cats by offering spay and neutering services to communities. And they also have a second part of their job where they have volunteers who are at different animal hospitals in the valley. And they're kind of liaisons between people and the charity. where if a family comes in and basically can't afford the medical bills for the pet and would essentially just have to put the pet down or just surrender the pet because they can't take care of it, this organization can step in and help to cover the vet bills so that the pet can stay with the family. You've got kids who are already living in poverty, and they have a really hard life because their family's down on their luck. And then you imagine this kid having their pet taken away from, or losing their pet as well on top of what's already going on. There's things that kids shouldn't have to go through, and so they really step in and help families that are in those situations. And both of those charities are like really highly rated, like A+ rated charities, where a large portion of the money that they take in goes directly to their causes. They have lower than average overhead, and so I really like both of those organizations. So those are two of the three I'm supporting this year. And the other one is the Gorilla International Fund, which is another really highly rated charity. This one goes into areas where gorillas actually live in the world, so areas of Africa and things like that, and works with native populations to have sustainability practices to help maintain gorillas' habitats, and basically just training and intervention to make sure that the gorillas have a place to continue to live and to continue to thrive, so they don't become endangered and eventually extinct. And that's another, again, like I said, another really highly rated charity. So if you were to buy one of those dice bags, or just by supporting me in other ways, like buying these busts or commission painting, I'm right now I'm doing about 40% to each of the two Arizona animal charities, about 20% to the Gorilla International Fund. But if you in particular like one of those causes and want to make sure that your money goes to one of those three, then I would certainly make sure that happens. Just trying to use my talents to do a little good in the world. By the way, if you ever do have to sand resin, you want to use a very, very high, well, I don't know exactly high grit, I mean a high number grit, which is the really, really fine paper, because it's a very soft material, so you don't want to use the super rough stuff. It's just going to scratch it all up. I mean, it'll do the job, it'll take off what you're trying to sand, but it's going to leave gouges behind in the soft material. But my recommendation, again, make sure you're wearing a mask if you're doing that. But also wet sandpaper. So you get sandpaper that can be done with wet sanding, and then you actually get it wet. So then the water and the wet sandpaper is going to trap the particles, so you're really not getting like resin dust everywhere. So those are my recommendations if you do find yourself needing to sand resin. Hey, Mr. Heath, what's up? So I was going to show you guys this, by the way, the underside of these, because I may not be doing this part on stream for the other models. So once I got them put together, so on the other side, I drilled a couple little holes to put my paperclip pegs into, so I can put them on my holders. But I also went ahead and drilled a hole that's the size of one of these metal rods. And so when it's time, I'm going to cut the metal rod down. So the metal rod will go into the bust, and then it'll go down into a hole like a base. So I went ahead and pre-drilled those holes. I don't want to do a lot of drilling when the model's painted, because things slip. You can scratch the model up or just rub paint off with your hands while you're trying to hold it into place, and because you got to kind of hold firm while you're drilling. Saturday's been good. I had a bunch of errands to run today, and then kind of unexpectedly I had a buddy who stopped by to take care of some things, and so he was here for a couple hours. So I intended to stream closer to noon, but I didn't really get to stream until 2 o'clock. But yeah, we're just putting together my second set of the Celtic busts for doing the paint along that's going to happen in a couple weeks. But then the first part of our session, we were making the base for this Redemptor Dreadnought. This is what we were doing in the first part of the video. Make the rubble of a destroyed building. So, how about you? What have you been up to? I know we had Dreadwall was in here earlier, Non-Washable Gamer, Blues Light Painting popped in. I don't know if he's still out there. Great Guy 1 was in here. I don't know who's in there still. I gotta wait for all the glue to dry on that base so I can do some more finishing touches to it, like put texture paint over it and fill in any areas that kind of as that stuff dries, because it was basically just a bunch of junk like bricks and stones and things all mixed in with glue. And so you put it all down and the glue wants to sort of shrink as it dries. And so as you put it on, it's going to be like a goopy mess, and then it's going to start to shrink a little bit, which is going to pop open little holes and some things that you didn't necessarily see when I was putting everything on there. So once that's dry, I'll be able to get a better idea about how the base looks, and I can do a few touch-ups. But yeah, I didn't have anything ready to paint for today. I'm still just putting some things together. Cool, man. Sounds like a fun game. I was telling people at the beginning of the stream that nothing is totally official yet, but Atlantis Miniatures was so ecstatic with the dwarves once he saw them in person, once the owner saw them in person, that he wants me to do a bunch more work for them. So I never count my chickens before they're hatched. We don't have any like firm plans about what models would be next or anything like that. But once I get done with this kind of backlog of other miniatures, I might be spending the rest of the year painting dwarves. So I hope you guys like the dwarves I've been painting, because you might see a whole bunch more of them over the course of the next 6 months. There's some really cool models in that line that aren't just basic dwarves, though. There's a female warrior riding what looks kind of like a saber-toothed tiger. There's a pygmy war mammoth that has a throne on the back of it. There's cavalry riders, but they're riding goats and giant hogs instead of horses. So some really cool stuff. So hopefully that all happens and I get to paint those. There's also a pretty good chance that there'll be some contests coming up in the next few months for Atlantis Miniatures models. I know he did a little contest when I first finished the 11 I was painting for him. But I would kind of like to do one where I paint up one of the little dwarves, and then that's given away as a contest for people. That would probably be something that they run, but I'll paint the model up for it. And what else I would like to do, because I ordered models for the release of the dwarves prior to him ever hiring me to paint for the company. So some of the models that I've already painted were ones that I really wanted to paint. In fact, I ordered them for myself. And so they're on their way now. But I'm not somebody who generally likes to paint the same model multiple times. So I probably won't repaint a lot of those. So I have a couple friends that want some of them, some of the duplicates. But very likely I'll do a giveaway for one of the models. I'm thinking it might be the saber-tooth rider. So the female warrior riding a saber-toothed tiger. I'm thinking once I get that model, and assuming I'm going to paint the one for Atlantis, if they send me one too, I'll have a duplicate, so I'll give mine away. And maybe a couple other little foot slogger dwarves.
Yeah, the fur is going to be really fun to paint on some of those models. I've done fur before. On the Wolf and Girl model, the hunter and her wolf, there's fur painted on that. Some other models I've done, but yeah, fur is both very, very fun and also very tedious to paint. And I enjoy doing it, but I have to just make sure to be careful and not try to do too much in one sitting. Because what I'll find I'll do is I'll really, really enjoy it for a couple hours. I'm just kind of in a zen zone and just painting. And then as my back starts to ache a little bit like it does after long painting sessions, my shoulders start to ache a little bit, the antsy feeling starts to creep in. And when you're doing really, really highly detailed work like that, you don't want to be feeling antsy because then you start to rush stuff. And so the biggest thing with fur, if you're not just trying to dry brush it, you're actually trying to paint all the fur, is to just take it in smaller chunks. And if you feel like and this is true for any high detail work on a model, if you try to be aware of your feeling, both your body and mental, and if you find yourself starting to get antsy or starting to feel like you might be rushing or might be tempted to rush, is just stop and come back to it later. Because you'd hate to put all that time in and then get to the end and then not be happy with it because you rushed the last parts. I've been there. Yeah, one of the things when you're painting fur, part of that process that you're curious about, is you have to sort of layer it on, because what you want is you want to give the hints of like little highlight strands or slightly different colors, especially in zones where maybe the color is shifting. There's spots or stripes or something. And so you kind of have to blend the two edges. You don't want it to be a really stark line. So you have to like base out your different areas and then use little like hatchings to kind of blend the two areas across each other. And then even when you get everything good, if you have dark areas of dark hair, you kind of need to go over and do a little bit of light hair, because again, those are little hairs that are catching the light. Or most dark hair actually has a few little white hairs mixed in, and you just want to just give it a lot of texture, visual texture. By the way, I finished the written tutorial for the Scribe models, the Scribe model from Atlantis. It's in 2 parts up on my website. The first part is kind of the general tips. It's things like paint consistency, light and dark on a miniature, things like that. So that's the first part. And the second part is actually specifically all the different parts of the Dwarf Scribe. I tweeted out and I shared the first part of the process one, but I haven't really been doing a ton of advertising for the second part yet. I sent the PDF to Atlantis Miniatures, and we talked a little bit about maybe if he wanted to be a blog post on his website and some different things like that. So I'm kind of waiting. I sort of want to let him have a little bit more of the glory when that goes out, have him a little bit more in control. So it is up on my website, but I'm not like doing a huge social media push on it. But if you are interested in seeing the full tutorial for the Scribe, you can go to GorillaWithABrush.com and go to the blog section. And the pinned blog is the one on basic tips and tricks and advice. And then you should see the one for the Dwarf Scribe there as well. Have I ever painted a leopard type pattern? So there is, I don't have every miniature I've ever painted up on GorillaWithABrush.com. Let me check and see if the model's up there before I direct you there. Actually, I'll probably show it under the camera here, and then you can also go see it if you want. So yeah, it's in here. So if you go to my website and you go to gallery and go to War Machine and Hordes and go to Legion of Everblight. So I painted this model for a friend. This was like back trying to do more of a cell shaded type style. There's a bit of a glare on the photo. I hate looking at pictures on phones. So I kind of did with this cloak, I did a couple different sections, like part of the cloak had been sewn on or repaired with a sort of a snow leopard type theme. You're not going to be able to see it with this resolution, like, you know, losing resolution in multiple layers here. But if you go check it out on my website and look at some of those pictures of it, you can see where I did, that might be the best. You might be able to see it here. So you've got the spots on it, but you've also got the hair texture. It goes over top of everything and blends those spots into the underlayer. That's the basic idea, so that you don't have the spots, so they don't look like, like one of the worst things you can do if you're painting on animal fur is to make it look like the animal has war paint on it. So like the spots and things are just painted on top of its skin. You don't really, that's not the look you're going for. So you need to create visual texture on top of it to sink it back in visually, so it's part of the background of the fur. It's because the spots are like all the way down to kind of skin level and then manifest with the different color hair. Also, Heath, you weren't around earlier in the there's a podcast I started listening to this week. It has about 15 episodes, so it doesn't take that long to catch up, especially if you're like me, you listen to podcasts at 1.5 speed. It's called Experience Pointers. And so the three hosts are just experienced RPG players and GMs, and they just talk about issues of role-playing games. So some of the topics they talk about are how to create characters that break the mold, so go away from sort of the stereotypical version of whatever like a cleric or a paladin or anything would be. There's episodes on like a GM's perspective. So one of the hosts has mostly been a player during her life, but she's just recently started to branch out and do some GMing. And so it's like post briefs with her after some of her first GM sessions about what she learned from the process and what was important and what she's going to do moving forward. So it's a great resource for people who are in a similar position. They've been players and they're going to be a GM. And so having some of that advice about what's going to make it the most successful transition. I've been impressed with its quality level and just how sort of clear-headed and interesting that the discussions are. And so it's called Experience Pointers is the name of the podcast. So anyway, I've been enjoying listening to those episodes, and I know that you're a big RPG guy, so I think you'll like it. I'll admit I didn't start with episode 1 because I just kind of started with some of the episodes that sounded the most interesting to me. So I started on some of the ones about GMing, and then I've been listening back to the ones about breaking the mold, and I'm kind of going back and now listening to all of them, but I started in some of the more recent episodes. But I've been enjoying it. Yeah, and I mean, you're the kind of guy who does this, but yeah, if you do like it, make sure to give them a shout out on Twitter. That kind of stuff really helps people who generate content. And tell them I sent you, which is kind of cool. It's always good to know, who recommends people, and helps just further build the kind of connections between content generators and artists, and yeah. But I think I got this main body all cleaned up. Put some peg holes in here for my little stands. So this is a pin vise. If you don't have one of these things are really, really good for pinning models. Pinning models is if you have really small joints on the model, you can drill in and then put like a little piece of paper clip or brass rod or anything like that, and it really, really, really strengthens the joint. Makes it less likely that model is going to break. And if you spend a lot of time painting models, the last thing you want to do is have pieces falling off all the time and have to glue them back on, which means you have to fix the paint job, and it just never looks the same. So you could always use a Dremel or you could use a drill, but those things have way more power than what you usually need or want going into a model. So this gives you a little bit more fine control. So I'm just using my drill bit that's the size of a larger paper clip. So it works really well for this. Then I'm also going to drill out the hole for the metal rod. So this particular pin vise, I don't know if they all do, but this one has 4 different size holes for different size drill bits. So you can get a pretty precision fit for pretty much about anything up to around a 1/8 inch drill bit. All right, so I want sometimes, so with bases or busts, they're usually cut at an angle like this. And so you'll see two different kinds of bases that people will put their busts on. So some of the bases are equally angled. So they come down, they'll have like a square bottom, and then at the top they have an angled top. So if you have one of those types of bases, what you generally want to do is drill your hole perpendicular to the angled surface. And then in your base, you would do it the same way, and then they kind of just slide in that way. I will probably be putting these guys on just round bases like this. I mean, this is obviously my holder. It'll have to be nicer than this, but it's just going to be kind of in a similar style like this. So we just go straight down. So because of that, I am going to make sure my drill bit's going to go in vertically. So you just kind of have to kind of line everything up and make sure that it's going in straight. And it's good to frequently check from both directions. So make sure it's going in straight from the back as well as from the side. Otherwise, you'll end up with a finished model who's stuck into his base and he looks like he's permanently like leaning to the side. Now, when you're doing this drilling, I'll give you a couple hints for this. This is not that big of a deal. There's plenty of room to spare. I could keep drilling to my heart's content and would not really have to worry about my drill bit popping out of the top of this model. But if you get to a point you want to know how deep your hole is, so put your finger so that your fingernail is right where the drill bit touches the model, and then pull out. And that gives you like an exact measurement of how deep the hole is in the model. This is really, really important if you are doing pinning on a joint on a model, because for whatever reason, it's like an optical illusion. You'll be drilling and you'll swear that you're only about halfway through the joint, and then all of a sudden your drill bit just pops out the other side. And so what you can do is you can stop, pull it out, and then put it up against the joint that you're drilling and just see literally how close the drill bit is when it's in the hole, how close it is to the end of that piece. I have saved myself numerous times where I'm just drilling along and I go, oh, I'm sure I've got plenty of room, but let me just check. And I pull it out, I stick it there and go like, oh, if I had even done just 2 or 3 more turns, I'd be right through. And there's been times when I'm just drilling along and I go, oh, I got plenty of room, and it goes right out the hole. And then I have to patch and use green stuff and fix everything. So it's better to be cautious, make a few rotations, check it, make a few rotations, check it. Always better safe than sorry. It's like the whole measure twice, cut once idea. So that's a little bit of a tight fit. So I'm just going to kind of widen the hole a little bit. Just keep turning and rock my drill bit back and forth and front to back. That's better. All right. So it's about that time. I've been streaming for a little over 2 hours, so I'm going to stop there, start making dinner and everything. But thanks for showing up, guys. By next Saturday, again, I'm going to stream next Saturday instead of Sunday. I I'm pretty sure, because next Sunday is Mother's Day. So I'll probably be back on again sometime midday next Saturday, like noon my time, roughly speaking, somewhere around there, maybe a little bit earlier, maybe 10 or 11 in the morning. I got to double check. I think I have something next Saturday, some family thing in the afternoon, so I got to figure out what time that starts. But I'll let you guys know the exact time when I know it. But I will see you next week, and I will very, very likely be painting something, probably that Redemptor Dreadnought. I should have it ready to go by then. But thanks again for everybody who stopped by. Have a great week. You guys are awesome. I appreciate it. Thanks.